Hey guys, tonight we slip into the shadowy back alleys of history where the stars aren't generals or presidents, but bananas. Yep, those bendy yellow fruits sitting in your kitchen were, at one point, quiet accomplices in one of the greatest global conflicts the world has ever known. You're standing in the salty air of a wartime harbor, the creaking of wooden docks beneath your feet, and somewhere in the distance, a long whistle cuts through the noise. A ship unloads quietly, stacked high not with weapons, but with crates of curved fruit. The cargo manifest doesn't list bananas. That's how you know something's up. You probably won't survive this, at least not without radically rethinking what you thought fruit could do in a war. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little channel reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a wartime dock in the early 1940s. The night air is thick with salt, oil, and coal smoke. British soldiers shout in clipped voices. American dockhands swing nets loaded with goods overhead. Crates are everywhere, marked as textiles, medical, and sometimes just vaguely labeled export, tropical. But if you get close enough, crack open a lid just so, you'll find bananas. Not just fruit, but a cover story. These banana boats, often retrofitted commercial ships that once delivered tropical produce to European breakfast tables, are now subtle cogs in the global war machine. Some carry essential medical supplies buried under a layer of actual bananas to avoid detection. Others serve as floating decoys, unarmed but looking important enough to lure enemy torpedoes away from the real cargo. And some, according to post-war interviews with sailors, served as message runners, their fruit compartments hiding cipher sheets and waxed banana skins. Tasty and treacherous. You wouldn't know it by looking at a banana, but during World War II, these ships were some of the stealthiest things afloat. The US and Britain even preserved parts of their commercial fruit fleet under military protection, cloaking them as civilian trade vessels. Historians still argue whether the banana fleets were officially listed as military assets, but the consensus? These weren't just floating fruit stands. They were low-key lifelines, floating just below the radar, literally and politically. Now imagine you're on one of these boats. You don't get a gun. You get a crate of Cavendish bananas, a damp bunk, and a whispered warning. If anything happens, burn the second crate. Why? Because that's where the microfilm lives, wedged in a hollowed-out pineapple for misdirection. Banana crates were just the beginning. Tropical produce became the perfect Trojan horse. And the routes? Oh, they were bizarre. From Honduras to New Orleans, then across to Liverpool. Some ships took deliberately absurd zigzags, wasting fuel just to avoid U-boats or suspicious eyes. You see, bananas were more than a cargo, they were camouflage. Nobody inspects bananas too closely in wartime. It's food, right? Innocent, everyday, harmless food. But ask yourself, why protect them so fiercely? Why assign Navy escorts to fruit boats? One reason lies in the United Fruit Company, a name that sounds boring until you realize they had their own fleet, their own railways, and some would argue, their own foreign policy. This wasn't just shipping bananas, it was securing influence. United Fruit offered help to the U.S. war effort, ships, logistical networks, and access to Central American ports, all wrapped in banana peels. Here's a quirky bit. Some sailors called these vessels yellow ghosts. Not because they were haunted, though honestly, wouldn't be surprised, but because they kept appearing in places no one could explain. Like a banana boat showing up off the coast of Casablanca with a fresh load of unregistered plantains and one mysteriously missing officer. One of those stories where the official logs get real quiet, real fast. And bananas had one more trick up their sleeve, scent masking. Some crews would mash bananas and spread the pulp in strategic locations to cover the chemical odors of fuel and ammo. Dogs couldn't pick up the trail. Neither could enemy agents sniffing for explosives. Weird? Absolutely. Effective? Reportedly, yes. Now take a moment to picture this. A Nazi officer interrogates a dock worker in Vichy, France. The man's sweating. There's a banana bunch hanging behind him. The officer scoffs. Bananas? In wartime? But that's the whole point. Nobody suspects the bananas. And while Europe starved, some Allied governments quietly hoarded bananas, not for their taste, but for their message. The arrival of bananas in a ration pack or on a child's hospital tray sent a powerful signal. We're winning. The empire still reaches here. Because what's a better sign of control than fruit from a continent away, showing up like it belongs? Bananas became morale markers, silent, cheerful proof that global logistics hadn't collapsed. They arrived in POW camps, in diplomatic banquets, in press photos of smiling soldiers who somehow have a banana in their lunch kit despite being 5 miles from the front. Go ahead, Google some more photos. That's not just lunch. That's messaging. Historians still argue whether the first banana drops were intentional propaganda or just lucky imports. But once commanders saw how the public reacted, they leaned in. Hard. A banana meant the world was still connected. The empire was still standing. The Allies could still bend the planet to deliver sweetness to the bitterest days. And by 1941, every banana wasn't just a fruit. It was a signal flare in a world full of smoke. You find yourself walking along a gray, rain-slick London street in 1941. Posters flap in the wind, some warn about blackouts, others beg you to dig for victory. You stop in front of a shop window. Rows of root vegetables squat gloomily under a flickering light, but your eyes catch the empty spot marked with a tiny sign. No bananas until further notice. It's not just a shortage. It's an absence with its own spotlight. You'd think a fruit vanishing from grocery shelves wouldn't matter much in a war. But in Britain, the sudden disappearance of bananas was like a national trauma wrapped in a yellow peel. Kids born during the war would grow up without ever tasting one. Adults whispered about them like a dream. And the blackout wasn't just about electricity, it was a banana blackout too. The Ministry of Food cut off banana imports in 1940. Submarines lurked in the Atlantic, and every cargo hold was precious space. Bananas, despite their peppy personality, were tropical freeloaders, nutritionally weak, perishable, and foreign. So, the government told the public they were not essential. But that didn't make it easier. Here's your historical fact for the night. In 1940, the UK imported roughly 70 million bunches of bananas a year before the war. By 1941? 0. No bananas. Not in shops. Not in ration books. Not even in Churchill's fridge, and you know the man liked his indulgences. But something strange happened. Instead of fading into obscurity, bananas became mythical. The very act of not having them gave them power. Children grew up thinking of bananas as an impossible luxury, like unicorns you could peel. And the British government, quite cleverly, didn't try to erase them. They used the banana's absence as a tool. You're now sitting in a cramped kitchen flat. The radio hums with a calm, clipped voice. Make do and mend. Try banana substitute for your Sunday sponge. Banana essence, barely fruity, almost entirely fake, flooded the market. Recipes popped up in women's magazines: banana-less banana bread, mashed parsnip mock bananas, and potato-based banana pudding that somehow tasted like regret. And oh, the fringe idea of the time? There was a strange belief, printed in more than one wartime leaflet, that sniffing banana essence could help homesick children remember better days. Olfactory propaganda at its finest. But you start to notice something more subtle. British wartime posters begin to include bananas in odd places, drawn bananas, nostalgic slogans like, "We'll peel again," tucked between rationing guidelines. They weren't reminders of scarcity. They were promises. When the war ends, we'll have bananas again. It became shorthand for victory. Even the BBC got in on it. Radio dramas would slip in lines about a character dreaming of a banana cream pie, or a soldier in a trench writing letters home asking if the grocer had seen any yellows on the docks. Historians still argue whether this was a coordinated campaign or just a national obsession given narrative form. But the cultural effect was real. Bananas became symbols of hope deferred. Their absence unified people more than their presence ever had. One particularly curious moment? In 1943, Queen Elizabeth, then still the princess, was photographed eating a banana, carefully and with a fork and knife, as royal manners required. The photo didn't appear in newspapers. It was distributed as a leaflet to Commonwealth allies, captioned modestly, "Even a princess waits for the peel." It was a message cloaked in grace. Nobody gets special treatment. We're all in this together. That's propaganda without slogans. Just a royal girl, a foreign fruit, and a silent war drum. You find yourself now outside a children's hospital in Birmingham. A nurse wheels out a trolley. On it, bananas, dozens of them. Not real ones, but papier-mâché versions made by volunteers for the children who'd never seen one. They used yellow paint, wax, and real banana smells, so kids could at least pretend. That's how deep the desire ran. One child, according to a BBC oral history, refused to eat a real banana after the war because it didn't smell like the ones we played with. Reality just couldn't compete with imagination. And the government, knowingly or not, let that illusion bloom. And yes, there were dark laughs too. Soldiers joked that bananas had gone off to fight fascism. Schoolteachers told children the fruits were hiding from Hitler. One London grocer kept a sign on his empty banana hook for the entire war that read, "Not ripe yet. Still on secret mission." By 1944, the Ministry of Information noticed something odd in its morale tracking reports. The most asked about food item in public letters wasn't chocolate. It was bananas. People weren't complaining, they were remembering. Longing. And here's a chilling little reality check. In late 1944, a shipment of bananas did arrive by accident. Misdirected aid meant for the Caribbean got dumped in Bristol. Officials confiscated and destroyed the fruit to avoid morale imbalance. Yes, really. The fear was that some people getting bananas would be worse than nobody getting bananas. The home front had its own battlefield of perception, fairness, and symbolic fruit. You don't want a revolution over a banana. But the war was ending, and the fruit that had disappeared so neatly was preparing a comeback. And the government knew that moment would need to be managed. Spoiler, it would involve cameras, children, and a long queue. So as you sit with your imaginary banana in hand, think of how powerful it is to miss something together. The British didn't fight for bananas, but bananas helped them imagine what peace might feel like. Sweet. Soft. Slippery with promise. You're now stepping into the soft, sweltering humidity of a Central American port in 1942, Puerto Barrios, Guatemala. You squint as the midday sun reflects off rows of crates marked in stenciled black, UFCO. The letters stand for United Fruit Company, but they might as well stand for Unofficial Foreign Command Operations. Because what you're looking at isn't just fruit, it's an empire within an empire. Banana-stained fingers sunk deep into Allied wartime logistics. You can smell it, bananas ripening in piles under canvas, diesel from trucks rumbling across gravel, and the sharper sting of tobacco on the breath of the American foreman barking orders. United Fruit's network is everywhere: shipping docks, banana plantations, railway lines guarded by men in uniforms that, while not technically military, sure look the part. By the time the war hits full swing, United Fruit isn't just exporting bananas. It's exporting infrastructure, intelligence, and influence. And the Allies are more than happy to shake that fruit-covered hand. Mainstream historians often talk about United Fruit as an industrial power, but less discussed is how it quietly became a strategic wartime partner. The company controlled vast swathes of Central America, often more effectively than the local governments. It had telegraph lines, radio stations, and control over port access, tools any intelligence agency would kill for. Literally. And kill they did sometimes. There's no formal paperwork saying the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, partnered directly with United Fruit. But oral testimonies and declassified scraps point to logistics sharing, information coordination, and use of non-state shipping assets. which is a fancy way of saying, "Hey, can we borrow your banana boat to move some spies?" Historians still argue whether the banana company was a willing puppet or a shadow player in its own right. But the timing was impeccable. Just when the U.S. needed Latin American cooperation to secure the hemisphere, United Fruit offered influence in countries like Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala. The price? Just let them keep running things their way. Bananas included. You're now crouching behind a warehouse near the dock. Workers in stained overalls unload bunches under the watchful eyes of what looks suspiciously like private security. But their rifles are military grade. One of them carries a clipboard with a British accent and a nervous tick. You see a banana crate being opened, and inside, not just fruit, but stacks of vacuum-sealed envelopes. Here's the quirky bit. Some field agents allegedly used bananas as camouflage for code drops. Real bananas would be hollowed out, the skin glued back on, and entire encryption instructions smuggled in this biodegradable pouch. Yes, it would go moldy fast. But the plan was to eat the evidence, or compost it into the jungle. Nature becomes the shredder. Meanwhile, United Fruit's public image was kept squeaky clean. Magazine ads back home showed smiling banana pickers and efficient railcars. There was even a cheerful jingle in 1943. "Go Bananas for Victory!" That played in between radio reports about bombings and meat rations. Think about that, war and bananas back to back on your living room radio. It's propaganda by whiplash. But deeper still, the company used its influence to shape perceptions of Central America. The region was sold to the public as cooperative, exotic, and brimming with friendly fruit. The reality? Union crackdowns, forced evictions, and entire villages displaced to build banana lines. But those stories didn't make it into Allied briefings. Instead, you got headlines like, "Banana Republics back the Allies," a line that sounded better than, "Corporate dictatorships aligned with our interests." And you know what? It worked. The banana image became a kind of moral screen, a yellow-tinted filter that obscured the more sinister logistics of empire. After all, who could worry about political suppression when a cartoon banana named Captain Cavendish saluted you from your cereal box? By 1944, United Fruit was also ferrying diplomats, supplies, and even military advisors across its private railways in Honduras and Guatemala. One wartime memo notes that the company's telegraph network rivals Western Union for speed and discretion. Imagine sending encrypted wartime messages over a banana company's infrastructure. But that's exactly what happened. And here's something fun and weird: bananas were even used as anti-Nazi PR tools. In one infamous Allied broadcast into occupied Europe, the narrator compared the Nazi regime to an overripe banana, sweet on the outside, but rotting at the core. Harsh, but weirdly effective. The message stuck. You now walk past a shipment being ready for Miami. A man in a rumpled white suit whispers something to a dock worker. The worker nods and places a green-tagged crate at the center of the pile. According to post-war debriefings, a green tag meant cargo contains confidential material. A yellow tag meant standard bananas. There were no red tags, because if it was urgent, you didn't send it on a banana boat. Of course, not everyone approved. Several Latin American leaders raised concerns about the company's unchecked influence. Some even called United Fruit a foreign power hiding in a fruit basket. And they weren't wrong. But with the war raging and the U.S. desperate to maintain supply lines and suppress Nazi influence in the Western Hemisphere, ethics took a backseat to efficiency. The company would later claim it was just a humble fruit supplier. But the paper trails, the radio logs, and the whispered deals say otherwise. And now, as you watch that last banana crate get sealed and pushed onto the gangplank, you realize something. These crates don't just carry fruit. They carry allegiances. They carry power. And sometimes, they carry things no one's ever supposed to find again. So next time you peel a banana, remember, it might not just be breakfast. It might be a chapter in a covert global chess game played under the mask of yellow skin. You now drift into a bustling 1942 London newsroom, where a poster is being slapped onto a kiosk outside. It's a vivid splash of color in a city drained to grayscale by war. The poster shows a grinning British Tommy biting into a banana the size of a rifle, under the bold caption, "Empire brings you strength." You blink. It's absurd, maybe even comical, but you can't look away. That's the point. Bananas, by now almost mythic in their absence, have started showing up in propaganda not as food, but as symbols of empire. And not just any empire, the empire. The British one. The one stretching across the globe like a particularly smug octopus, tentacles gently holding up bananas. It might seem silly, but bananas had a colonial pedigree. They didn't grow in Britain. They grew where Britain ruled. Jamaica. British Honduras. Sierra Leone. British propagandists knew this, and leaned in hard. They didn't just want the British public to dream of bananas. They wanted them to dream of power over places where bananas come from. You walk past more posters now. One shows a British soldier handing a banana to a sun-kissed island child, as if to say, "Look, even in war, we share our bounty." Another has a caption that reads, "From our colonies with pride." It's all about optics. Bananas as benevolence, bananas as soft power, bananas as a reminder that the world still bends to the empire's will, even when ration books say otherwise. Here's your historical fact. In the early 1900s, the British Empire had turned banana importation into a strategic symbol of connectivity, piping tropical fruits into the metropole as proof of global dominion. Wartime simply repackaged that legacy into posters and parades. But not everyone chewed on that narrative so easily. There were more subversive banana images too, cartoons and underground papers showing British officials dressed in banana skins, slipping on their own colonial arrogance. Some critics mocked the idea of banana diplomacy, pointing out that it was hard to claim victory when your children had never seen the fruit in question. One fringe leaflet even renamed the United Kingdom the United Fruitdom. Subtle? Not really. But you get the point. And yet, the empire pushed forward. You're now attending a bizarre 1943 exhibit in Manchester called Victory Gardens of the Empire. Among displays of African cocoa pods and Indian spices is a large rotating model of a banana tree, complete with a looping narration. Bananas, gift of the tropics, strength of the empire. It's weirdly hypnotic. Kids stand in line to spin a wheel that matches flags to fruits. If you landed on Jamaica, you got a fake banana sticker and a message about colonial loyalty. Colonial branding, 1940s style. Historians still argue whether the banana imagery was deliberately strategic, or just a lazy symbol of otherness. Was it a clever metaphor for global unity, or a way to distract the public from increasingly shaky imperial foundations? Either way, it worked. The banana became something to believe in. Something that said, look at what we still control. Look at what's waiting for you after the victory. And let's talk about the banana parade. Yes, really. In 1944, at a morale-boosting event in Birmingham, a children's parade featured a float shaped like a giant banana. Inside sat kids dressed as sailors and soldiers, waving to crowds while tropical music played over loudspeakers. It was pure spectacle, and pure messaging. The empire may be strained, but look, it's still smiling. And it still throws fruit-themed pageants. There's also this lesser-known tidbit. British coins minted in some colonies during wartime featured banana trees subtly etched into the background. Not prominent, but there if you squint. Coin as quiet propaganda. Tiny reminders of tropical bounty pocketed by empire. Back in London, government artists developed cartoon mascots to personify banana pride. One was Benny the Banana, a monocle-wearing fruit who appeared in children's newsletters like War Weekly Jr. Benny toured the empire by cartoon, teaching kids about friendly nations, where bananas grew, and helpful natives, who harvested them for the Allied cause. The tone? Cheerful. The subtext? Well, a little colonial, a little weird, and very, very intentional. Then there's the sound. You walk through the BBC's wartime radio offices and hear a calypso beat filtering through a closed door. It's being prepped for a radio segment highlighting the musical spirit of the West Indies. The lyrics mention bananas and bravery, sunshine and submarines. It's propaganda with a dance rhythm, spoonful of sugar and all that. Soft power. Rhythmic imperialism. Of course, the banana wasn't the only imperial fruit used this way, but it was the most iconic. Pineapples were too spiky, coconuts too weird. But bananas? Bananas were approachable. Funny even. The empire could sell itself through bananas because bananas made people smile. One curious debate among colonial officials at the time was whether the banana should be elevated as the fruit of unity in empire-wide broadcasts. Some said yes, it was cheerful, known, and comforting. Others said no, it was too silly, and it might undercut more serious messaging. The verdict? A compromise. Bananas would remain in visual propaganda, but not spoken slogans. Apparently, even fruit has a PR ceiling. You finish your walk through the empire's banana-laced dreamscape and find yourself staring at one last poster, a sailor gripping a rope in one hand and a banana in the other. The caption? We hold the line, and the fruit. It's absurd. It's bold. And somehow, in 1944 it works. The banana was no longer just a treat. It was a metaphor for connection, stability, and global reach. A message that said, you might be eating turnip stew, but out there, we still have bananas. And maybe, just maybe, we'll bring them back to you soon. You're reclining now on a squeaky, sun-faded deck chair in a modest American backyard, circa 1943. It's a war bond drive weekend. There's a radio crooning swing tunes through the open kitchen window. And inside, perched atop a chipped formica counter, sits a single banana, gleaming, fresh, absurdly photogenic. The crowd inside doesn't realize it yet, but this banana has been carefully placed for effect. Because here in the United States, bananas aren't just exotic imports. They've become emblems of vitality, victory, and the post-depression smile. Before Pearl Harbor, Americans already loved bananas. The country had spent the 1930s turning them into a poster child for cheap nutrition. In the Great Depression, they were the affordable fruit, the cheerful curve in a gray decade. But as the war cranked into high gear, the U.S. government and its marketing allies weaponized that love. Bananas, they realized, could sell more than health. They could sell hope. You flip through a 1943 issue of Good Housekeeping and spot a full-page ad, a glowing mom in an apron handing her freckled son a banana. The tagline reads, "Keep him strong. Keep him smiling. Keep him going." The banana has taken on new duties: combat morale, home front optimism, and patriotic calories. And here's your historical fact. In 1943, American grocers moved more bananas than apples or oranges combined. Why? Because the U.S. prioritized importing them, even during wartime, to maintain national morale. That's how embedded they were in the culture. When other countries cut banana shipments, the U.S. doubled down. You walk into a wartime nutrition seminar hosted by the Office of War Information. A bright-eyed woman with tight curls and a pointer is directing your attention to a pyramid on a chalkboard. There it is, bananas, front and center under the label. Quick energy foods. Soldiers need stamina. Families need spirit. Bananas are practically doing push-ups in the brochure. Even children's books got in on it. There's Benny Banana's War Patrol, in which an anthropomorphic banana defeats the rotten apple axis through teamwork and potassium. It's all very subtle. Or not. And it worked. Bananas became the feel-good fruit of the war. You're now in a war bond cinema trailer, watching a cartoon where a tired soldier gets back to base, flops onto a crate of bananas, and regains his strength after just one bite. The crowd chuckles. You do too. But beneath the chuckle is a message: bananas equals American endurance. There's also a strange footnote. General Mills ran a brief 1944 ad campaign arguing that bananas were the cereal's best friend in wartime. A bowl of Wheaties, a sliced banana, and suddenly you were nutritionally supporting the troops, even if your contribution came from a spoon. Some propaganda is loud. Some is just breakfast. And here's your quirky tidbit. In a rare misstep, a government pamphlet once listed bananas as a strategic food for battlefield performance, prompting a mild panic that banana prices would spike or vanish. They had to reprint it a week later, clarifying, "We meant emotionally strategic, not materially vital." Too late. Banana hoarding ensued in several small towns. Apparently, you don't mess with American fruit emotions. You pass through an elementary school where a health poster features the Banana Brigade, a gang of grinning fruits with arms and legs, each named after a vitamin. Captain B for B6. Corporal C for cheer. It's propaganda for kids, wrapped in nutrition and cartoons. But its message is deeply adult. Eat right to fight right. And bananas are frontline recruits. But it wasn't just about food. Bananas started appearing in war bond marketing. Posters showed smiling GIs tossing banana peels at caricatured Axis villains. Others depicted bananas as victory fruit, bright yellow against black and white backgrounds, the only thing in color. Subtle visual coding told the viewer, this is what we're fighting for. Wholesomeness. Cheer. Brightness. Historians still argue whether this was a centralized campaign or a cultural coincidence. Did the government actively pick bananas as a mood booster? Or did marketers simply tap into something already there? Some believe the banana's visual shape, a simple arc, a natural smile, made it irresistible for visual psychology in war design. Others think it's foreign but familiar. Status gave it just the right emotional temperature. And then, there's the banana bread explosion. Wartime cookbooks exploded with banana bread recipes. Not because bananas were everywhere, they were still rationed, but because the idea of banana bread was comforting. Even if the bananas were overripe. Even if the flour was substituted. Even if the sugar had to come from a neighbor. Banana bread became a wartime ritual. A thing you baked when you needed to pretend everything was going to be fine. So many households mailed loaves to soldiers overseas that the military had to issue guidelines. No perishable fruit breads, please. Of course, people sent them anyway. That smell, they said, reminded the boys of home. And isn't that what propaganda's about? Smell. Emotion. Memory. Now picture this. A GI sits in a trench, his boots soaked, his face lined. He opens a care package from home. Inside, a slice of banana bread. It's dense, a little green in the corners. But he eats it slowly. Not because it tastes good, but because it means something. It's sweet. And sweetness, in war, is rare. You end the day back on that backyard deck chair. The banana on the counter is gone. Probably sliced into someone's cornflakes or mashed into something lovingly mailed across the ocean. But its spirit lingers in every ad, every poster, every quiet meal meant to say, hang in there. We've still got a little brightness left. You now find yourself standing in the clean, clinical chill of a 1942 German research lab, fluorescent lights buzzing, white coats flapping as chemists and biologists pace between steaming beakers and rows of very uncomfortable-looking bananas. This isn't your average tropical produce stand. It's part of a strange, obsessive corner of Nazi science, the fruit nutrition frontier, where bananas were being studied as if they held the secret to Aryan supremacy. Yes, you've walked into the world of Nazi fruit science, and you may want to brace yourself. Germany, blockaded and resource-starved, had limited access to exotic imports during the war. Bananas? Practically unobtainable. But instead of simply moving on to cabbage and grumbling, some German scientists went deep. They wanted to recreate bananas from scratch. Or, more accurately, manufacture their nutritional properties in a lab. Because if you couldn't have the real fruit, maybe you could still build the Reich's perfect soldier using what the banana represented: energy, efficiency, and global power. Here's your historical fact. The Nazi, Deutsche Ernährungsgesellschaft, German Nutrition Society, genuinely funded research into synthesizing tropical nutrients, including banana compounds, for use in rations. The aim was to enhance field performance without needing actual imports. The labs had limited success. But that didn't stop them from trying. One fringe theory floating around in Third Reich scientific circles, printed in a 1941 nutrition journal, suggested that bananas were superior to other fruits because they absorbed solar vitality from equatorial zones. Sound like pseudoscientific nonsense? That's because it was. But it was dressed up in charts and equations, couched in the era's obsession with Lebensraum and biological supremacy. Historians still argue whether this work was serious nutritional science or ideological theater, one more attempt to claim superiority by hijacking nature itself. But the notes are there, tucked into brittle German archives, ratios of mashed banana to synthetic glucose. Test results on lab mice fed banana extract substitute. One per intern was assigned to chart the emotional responses of Wehrmacht officers given banana-flavored gelatin. His conclusion: results inconclusive. Some preferred vanilla. You walk past a display board inside the lab. A large poster shows a caricatured Englishman slipping on a banana peel labeled colonial weakness. In the Nazi imagination, bananas represented decadence and decay, a fruit that only soft empires relied upon. Their propaganda often mocked Britain's obsession with bananas, calling it a diet fit for children and cowards. There was even a satirical radio skit on German stations titled Das Bananenreich, poking fun at Britain's colonial nostalgia. And yet, behind the ridicule, the Reich wanted what it mocked. There were whispered reports of Himmler requesting banana essence for elite SS units. A 1943 memo even suggested importing a small number of bananas from neutral Portugal for selective physiological evaluation. Translation? Taste tests for the Nazi elite, under the guise of science. Quirky tidbit for the night? One Berlin cafe, favored by upper officers, offered a dessert called the Aryan banana split, which, in reality, contained no bananas whatsoever. It used sweetened potato paste shaped into crescents and dyed with turmeric for that golden hue. Patrons pretended it was real. Even the most fanatical regimes have their silly little fictions. But it wasn't just science and snobbery. German propaganda also used bananas as a visual device in their anti-Allied messaging. Leaflets dropped over France and Belgium sometimes featured bananas rotting beside British flags, suggesting imperial collapse. One even accused Winston Churchill of trading bullets for bananas, though what exactly that meant was never clear. Still, it got a laugh. By now, you're sitting in the cramped break room of that lab. A young assistant reads quietly from a propaganda pamphlet. The Tropical Lie of the Allied World. In it, the author suggests that the Allies' love of bananas proves their reliance on enslaved nature. The implication? The Reich, pure and self-sustaining, needs no such foreign crutches. But as you sip their coffee substitute, made from acorns and regret, you realize the irony. For all their posturing, they couldn't ignore the banana's power as a symbol. The Allies weren't just feeding soldiers, they were feeding the idea that the world still worked. That ships could still cross oceans. That distant sunshine could still be peeled and eaten with a grin. And deep down, the Nazis knew that scared people. So they tried to respond, not with real bananas, but with spectacle and substitutes. In one bizarre exhibition in occupied Prague, Nazi officials displayed a sculpture titled Fruits of the Fatherland, a towering cornucopia of carrots, beets, and a papier-mâché banana at the top, with the tag Unsers nicked. Brötchen were nicked. Not ours. We don't need it. It's defensive. A little desperate. And oddly poetic. Meanwhile, Allied propaganda turned the tables. British leaflets mocked the Reich's fruitless future, while American cartoons featured Hitler slipping on banana peels into rhetorical graves. Even the New Yorker got in on it, publishing a 1944 cartoon of Hitler attempting to eat a banana while wearing boxing gloves, captioned, "He can't even peel it right." So while bananas never touched Nazi rations in any meaningful way, their symbolic presence lingered. In mocking others, the Reich exposed its own insecurities. Bananas were imperial, yes, but they were also joyful, messy, unpredictable. Things the Nazis couldn't stand. You return to the lab one last time. The fruit flies have overtaken the sample trays. The scientist you watched earlier sighs as he tosses out yet another failed batch of banana substitute. Outside, bombs rumble in the distance. Inside, a simple truth echoes: some things can't be engineered. Not joy. Not sunlight. And definitely not bananas. You're now leaning over the edge of a battered Allied bomber as it rattles over occupied France. The cold air cuts your cheeks, and in your gloved hand you clutch not a bomb, not even a ration box, but a stack of cartoon leaflets covered in bright yellow fruit and grinning monkeys. They're about to fall like confetti on a village below. And no, this isn't some surreal fever dream. This is Banana Propaganda, Airborne Edition. Bananas, sweet, harmless, comic by nature, were drafted into the aerial leaflet war. The Allies, especially the British and Americans, discovered that humor could slip through enemy defenses where bullets couldn't. And what's funnier, more slippery, more cartoonish than a banana? You glance down. The leaflets tumble out, flipping and twirling, eventually landing among Nazi checkpoints and half-frozen civilians. One shows a Nazi officer slipping on a giant banana peel as French peasants cheer. Another features Hitler himself juggling bananas labeled "Lies, Defeat," and "Paranoia," with the punchline, "He drops everything eventually." It sounds silly, and it is, but don't underestimate the calculated psychology. Here's your historical fact. The Psychological Warfare Division of SHAF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, actively funded the creation and dispersal of satirical leaflets featuring banana-based jokes, often designed by artists from the Daily Mirror and Punch magazine. These weren't just chuckles. They were message bombs, bright, absurd distractions designed to crack morale and plant doubt in Axis-occupied regions. Some leaflets, according to records, even included instructions for children to color in banana-themed cartoons, subtle signals to keep young minds engaged with Allied presence. You can imagine it. A Nazi officer steps into a courtyard, sees a child drawing a smiling banana soldier on a wall, and realizes the propaganda war is already being lost. But paper wasn't the only medium. You now enter a U.S. Army film screening room. The reels clack and whirl. On screen, a banana peel glides across the floor and trips a cartoon Goebbels into a vat of propaganda glue. The audience of GIs roars with laughter. It's wartime animation at full throttle. Tex Avery meets Total War. One memorable short, Banana Blitzkrieg, starred a chimpanzee commando squad armed with potassium-powered grenades, invading a fictional island ruled by goose-stepping pineapples. The symbolism wasn't exactly subtle. But the banana, used here as both weapon and punchline, was unmistakably Allied. Soft fruit. Hard message. And yes, bananas even infiltrated comic strips. In Stars and Stripes, a recurring character named Sarge Banano marched through panels weekly, armed with a satchel full of banana peels and sarcastic jabs at Nazi bureaucracy. His signature move? Slipping a fascist, then leaving a "Made in the Tropics" calling card. Juvenile? Sure. Effective? Surprisingly. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. One batch of British leaflets in 1943 included Scratch and Sniff banana scent. The idea was to grab attention and trigger nostalgic longing in fruit-starved territories. It was an experimental run. Only 500 were dropped over northern France, but the rumor of smelling Allied air made its way into local gossip. You can't occupy people's senses forever. You step now into a cluttered Allied PR office in London. A young corporal is sketching out a new comic strip. This one shows Mussolini being pelted with bananas by angry Italian housewives, shouting, "We asked for bread, not bruised fruit." The corporal grins. "Let 'em laugh," he says. "As long as they laugh our way." Historians still argue whether this genre of propaganda had measurable effects. Some scoff at its childishness. Others believe humor was essential in breaking the hypnotic hold of fear and conformity in occupied territories. After all, if you can laugh at a tyrant, you've already dethroned them a little in your mind. In Nazi-occupied Netherlands, underground presses reprinted banana cartoons from Allied leaflets and pasted them on market stalls. One such cartoon showed a grumpy Hitler being fed mashed banana by a nurse labeled Allied Forces. A tiny speech bubble read, "Open wide, little dictator." Risky? Yes. But revolutionary in its own way. And let's not forget the banana peel gag, endlessly repeated across all media. Why? Because it was universal. You didn't need to speak English to understand someone slipping on a banana. It transcended language, age, and fear. It said, "We're laughing, and you can too." But the Allies weren't the only ones to get fruity. German radio broadcasters mocked the banana fixation, calling it the tropical crutch of a decaying West. One broadcast sneered, "While the Reich sharpened steel, the Americans sharpened bananas." Unintentionally hilarious? Absolutely. The Allies pounced on that line. Within weeks, posters appeared showing a GI sharpening a banana into a sword captioned, "Even fruit fights for freedom." Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Soviet propaganda occasionally dipped a toe into fruit metaphor, though bananas were rare in Russia. One leaflet mocked Hitler's Italian alliance by showing him eating a banana labeled Mussolini, then slipping on the peel labeled Stalingrad. Subtle? No. Powerful? Maybe. And don't forget radio propaganda. The BBC's European service sometimes opened satirical segments with the sound of a banana peel squish, followed by a mock Nazi rant, then laughter. It was auditory graffiti, low effort, high impact, and impossible to unhear. The brilliance of banana propaganda was its contrast. In a world of rubble, air raids, and loss, the absurdity of slipping on a fruit peel felt radical. It poked at the pomposity of fascism. It said, "We still have the right to laugh, and that means we're still human." You climb back into the belly of that bomber now, empty crate beside you, banana leaflets fluttering like yellow snow over the countryside. Somewhere down there, someone will pick one up. Maybe they'll laugh. Maybe they'll pass it on. Maybe, just maybe, they'll start to believe the war can be won. Not just with guns, but with grins. You slip now into the humid, creaking cargo hold of a merchant ship docking just before dawn in Marseille, 1944. A crewman, wiping his brow with a dirty sleeve, carefully pries open a crate marked "Fruit perishable." Inside? Bananas, mostly. But tucked beneath the fruit's curve, nested in wax paper and burlap, are rolled sheets of encrypted paper, sealed with wax and stitched into false stems. Welcome to the world of spy bananas, where potassium meets espionage. The Allies, already masters of coded messages and covert supply chains, began to realize that fruit crates, specifically banana crates, offered the perfect camouflage. Why? Bananas were perishable, high turnover, and boring to customs officers. And better yet, they had natural cavities, perfect little hidey holes once you got past the peel. Historians still argue whether this technique began with the British Special Operations Executive or the French Resistance, but surviving testimonies and field reports confirm it happened. Resistance operatives in occupied France received instructions hidden in wax-treated banana skins, often disguised as bruised or overripe fruit. Peeling one could reveal anything from Morse code to topographical sketches. And no one thought twice about bananas. Not the guards, not the shopkeepers, not even the grumpy rail clerks who routinely opened crates and stuffed them shut again. Bananas moved constantly, from port to rail, rail to market. No one kept inventory. And that was the point. Tonight's quirky tidbit? According to one declassified OSS report, there was a brief attempt to train carrier pigeons to recognize crates labeled bananas. The theory was that the birds could find drop points by identifying certain stencil patterns. The program failed. Pigeons can't read, apparently, but someone actually got funding for it. More successfully, banana stickers became quiet messengers. A certain shape of sticker, oval with a curved blue border, meant message received. Another color scheme might indicate that a safe house had been compromised. Simple, silent, overlooked by most. You're now crouching behind a market stall in Belgium. A woman in a kerchief is organizing produce, arranging bananas in neat, innocent rows. But to those in the know, her display is a code grid. The direction each banana faced conveyed a binary cipher. Facing left meant 1, facing right meant 0. Resistance couriers memorized sequences by walking past her stall on the way to collect bread. It sounds ridiculous. But it worked. Another clever method? Ink made from banana sap. Invisible to the eye, revealed only when exposed to heat. Resistance members used banana pulp diluted with vinegar to write on ration papers, margin notes, even the backs of portraits. Hold it over a candle, and the secret emerged in tan script. Even the United Fruit Company, remember those shadowy friends of the Allies from Section 3, played their part. Some of their banana crates leaving Central America were double-bottomed. The top layer? Bananas. The hidden compartment? Radio components, microfilm, and sometimes cash. Disguised sabotage kits tucked under a layer of tropical cheer. And not all messages were technical. Some were emotional. One account from a captured courier tells of a child's drawing hidden inside a banana box, depicting a sun and a tree and a house labeled, "When you come home." Not military intelligence. But morale-boosting intelligence? Absolutely. Of course, the Axis eventually caught on. German patrols began randomly slicing open banana shipments, especially in northern Italy and the Vichy zone. But they still missed most of it. The key was simplicity. Nothing high-tech. Just fruit, wax, and silence. There's even a tale, possibly apocryphal, of a British agent in Portugal who sent critical coordinates to MI6 by baking them into banana bread, the crust marked with a casual B that told the recipient which slice to break apart. Was it really used? Historians still argue. But several accounts suggest similar culinary messages passed through neutral territories, where food was the only thing that didn't raise suspicion. Then there were the banana boats themselves. Some Allied-aligned merchant ships used banana cargo as mobile drop sites. Couriers would row out in dinghies under cover of night, swap crates with identical-looking ones from the hold, and vanish before sunrise. The exchanged crates looked no different, but inside, they'd carry orders, cyanide pills, or false passports. One 1944 OSS memo even included an astonishingly detailed guide titled, "Standard Modifications to Cavendish Fruit for Contingency Operations." It laid out how to hollow a banana, seal it again with beeswax, and mark it with a barely visible pinprick pattern. Step 4 included a very serious instruction. Do not refrigerate after sealing. Wax integrity may compromise. You almost hear the agent writing it, forehead damp, whispering, "This is someone's job now." You move now through a darkened resistance hideout in Lyon. On the table, a pile of bananas lies next to a radio set and a typewriter. One by one, the fruit is checked for messages, weighed for inconsistencies, sniffed, even gently squeezed. One feels wrong. It's opened. Inside, a tightly rolled photo of a bridge with German trucks crossing. The bridge will be gone by morning. And that's the truth about spy bananas. They weren't flashy. They weren't James Bond. They were quiet, untraceable, laughably mundane. And that's what made them perfect. Bananas don't look suspicious. Bananas don't squeal. Bananas just keep moving, ripe with secrets. You're crouched now in the sticky undergrowth of a Central American plantation, the sun barely up and the birds already screaming their territorial poetry. Around you, workers in sweat-drenched cotton shirts move through rows of towering banana plants, machetes glinting in the dawn light. But there's something else here, something deeper than fruit. You're about to peel back a story of colonial resistance, where the banana isn't just cargo. It's a cover. A code. A quiet act of rebellion. The banana plantations of British Honduras, Guatemala, and Colombia weren't just export zones during World War II. They were pressure cookers of labor, politics, and propaganda. As bananas were being loaded onto ships bound for Allied shores, they were also being used to smuggle banned books, whisper seditious songs, and move people the empire had tried to forget. Here's your historical fact. During World War II, several uprisings and labor strikes occurred on banana plantations controlled by the United Fruit Company and British colonial authorities, many under the guise of workplace disputes, but with deep political undercurrents. Wages were stagnant. Conditions were brutal. And the war became the perfect excuse for those in power to tighten control while saying they were fighting fascism. But workers weren't fooled. They knew who wore the boots. You make your way through a coastal warehouse in Honduras, where crates are being prepared for shipping. One young worker, barely 17, slips a folded piece of paper into a hollowed banana stem. It's not a spy code. It's a pamphlet, printed in secret, arguing for the right to organize, a crime under the wartime emergency labor policies. The crate will make it to New Orleans. So will the message. Maybe. This is the quieter resistance, the kind that doesn't always get songs or statues. Plantation workers used banana routes as information corridors, passing news to family, activists, and sometimes, to the very allied forces their governments claimed to support. One plantation in Jamaica in 1942 saw its workers coordinate a week-long slowdown. Not a strike, that would get them beaten or jailed, but a banana bend. They deliberately curved the fruit awkwardly in the wrong direction, making it unfit for export. Plantation managers called it spoilage. The workers called it justice. You want a quirky tidbit? In Suriname, a plantation crew trained parrots to mimic the phrase, "Banana for all," and released them near the company offices. The squawking, repeated endlessly, drove the overseers to exhaustion and was taken by workers as a sign that even nature had joined the fight. But resistance wasn't always prankish. Sometimes it was dangerous. In British Honduras, an underground network of Maroons, escaped workers and their descendants, moved through banana fields at night, helping the sick flee, hiding documents, and burning fields as protest. Some of these burnings were reported in British intelligence logs as enemy sabotage, but historians now believe they were local uprisings, not Axis plots. There's also the matter of music. You step into a makeshift dance hall in Trinidad. The record player scratches as it spins a calypso tune. On the surface, it's about bananas, sunshine, and rum. But listen closer. The lyrics twist and jab. Banana boat come, carry man away / say he go for work, never see him till today. It's protest in rhythm. The kind the colonial censors didn't catch until much later. And it wasn't just music. It was art, graffiti, storytelling. In marketplaces across Kingston and Belize City, banana stalls became unofficial rumor hubs. The vendors didn't just sell fruit, they sold information. The latest news from the front. The truth about a cousin who disappeared. The whispered name of an American buyer who asked too many questions. Historians still argue how organized these resistance movements truly were. Some believe they were spontaneous, a natural reaction to wartime stress and colonial abuse. Others think they were quietly orchestrated by nationalist groups, laying the groundwork for post-war independence. Either way, the banana became a strange kind of beacon. It was everywhere. And it carried everything: hope, frustration, coded resistance. And sometimes it carried people. You now trail behind a caravan of crates heading toward the Belize River. Hidden inside one stack? A child, about 9, smuggled out of a military police zone to rejoin family on the coast. Wrapped in burlap, curled beneath a false bottom. A banana crate as escape pod. Risky, but not rare. Even in the cities, resistance found fruit. In Panama, banana sellers used chalk markings to indicate which vendors were safe for political talk. A triangle meant, "Don't speak." A crescent? Ask about the letters. Those letters, by the way, often described poor treatment by American military personnel or rumors of land seizures. And while these small acts never made headlines, they bent the arc of history just enough. After the war, the colonial powers tried to reclaim their hold. But the resistance networks, those built on bananas, whispers, and footpaths, had grown too thick, too well-rooted. In 1949, Honduras erupted in labor protests again. In 1950, Jamaica's People's National Party surged in support. The groundwork had been laid in wartime, beneath banana leaves. You pass one final memory tonight, a battered notebook found decades later in a market wall in Belize. Inside are hand-drawn banana symbols and a log of names, likely members of a wartime resistance crew. On the back cover, one line in fading ink. Freedom is a fruit. We learned from the best. Bananas weren't just food. They were cover. They were code. They were quiet acts of war against the noise of empire. You're now hunched over a rickety kitchen table in Coventry, 1944. The wallpaper peels. The tea's thin. The overhead bulb flickers like it's on its last gasp. In your hands is a splattered recipe leaflet from the Ministry of Food titled, "Banana Cake Without Bananas." You read it again, just to make sure. Nope, no bananas in sight. Instead, mashed parsnip, a drop of banana essence, and a lot of imagination. Welcome to the curious wartime alchemy of banana recipes and ration magic. Bananas were rare or non-existent in many war-torn countries, but oddly, they never left the kitchen. Not because people had them, but because people remembered them. The banana became a phantom flavor, haunting cookbooks and ration pamphlets like the friendly ghost of better times. Here's your historical fact. British housewives during World War II were regularly given recipes for banana desserts, even when bananas hadn't been available in years. Why? Because keeping banana-themed dishes in circulation gave people something to look forward to. A psychological trick in a time of gray food and grayer skies. Tonight, you've got mashed marrow standing in for bananas. Or maybe potato. Maybe turnip. Anything that could be sweetened, mashed, and scented with banana extract. And oh yes, the banana essence industry soared during the war. Bottled illusion. A few drops in your cake and you could pretend. Sort of. You now walk through a crowded grocer's shop in 1943. On the top shelf, in a locked case, sit a dozen vials of banana flavoring. The sign reads, "Asked to view?" Not asked to buy. Just view. A reminder that even the ghost of a banana had status. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some children were given banana-flavored chalk tablets as vitamin supplements. The flavor was more pharmaceutical optimism than fruit joy. But still, banana as medicine, banana as myth. And yet, the recipes kept coming. You flip through the People's War Cookbook and find delights like banana-less banana custard, made with custard powder, dried fig paste, and vanilla. Victory banana porridge, oats, milk, and a single, cherished drop of essence. Mock banana ice cream, dried mashed parsnip with powdered milk and sugar. People knew it was fake. That wasn't the point. Historians still debate whether this was government policy or just culinary inertia. Did the Ministry of Food keep printing banana recipes to preserve morale? Or did they just not want to admit the fruit was gone for good? Either way, cooks soldiered on. And in a strange twist, the lack of bananas actually sharpened the fruit's cultural role. Now let's cross the Atlantic. In the United States, bananas were still more available, but rationing still bit hard. Housewives learned to stretch one banana into 4 servings. One recipe advised slicing a banana lengthwise and widthwise, a polite way of saying, "Quarter that sucker and pray for mercy." Banana bread, which we met earlier in Section 5, became a civilian rallying cry. Not just dessert, but statement. We may have no meat, but we've got cake. American cookbooks boasted recipes like double-duty banana loaf, feeds guests and morale. Victory muffins, half banana, half grated carrot, 100% propaganda. No waste banana pie. Uses black peels in the crust, don't ask. You're sitting now in a schoolroom in Liverpool, where a group of children crowd around a tray of what's been called banana pudding. It's a steaming mixture of barley, sugar, and mashed sweet potato, decorated with banana-shaped slices of apple. The kids whisper to each other, asking what it tastes like. The teacher says, "It tastes like we're winning." They believe her. One girl later writes in her diary, I had banana pudding today. I think it was banana. It tasted like what I remember it should be. That memory? That imagination? That's the real recipe here. Even soldiers got in on the fantasy. Field manuals offered banana alternatives to boost morale during downtime. One suggested heating tinned pears with rum extract and pretending they were bananas Foster. The instructions ended with, "Use imagination liberally." You couldn't ration that. In India and parts of Africa, where bananas still grew, things got even more ironic. Bananas were everywhere, but often requisitioned for the British military, leaving local civilians to improvise with less. Posters in Nairobi showed smiling troops with banana smoothies, while locals scraped the bottom of the fruit barrels. Some called it colonial cooking with imperial garnish. And then there were the banana-themed ration coupons. In some territories, people were issued tiny yellow chits with a peel motif, redeemable for either banana products or, more often, banana substitutes. Kids sometimes wore them like badges. One boy in Glasgow collected them, stringing them into a necklace, calling it "my war treasure." Was it propaganda? Of course. But not all propaganda is loud. Some of it is slow and sweet, like parsnip pretending to be banana, convincing a weary family that normalcy isn't gone, it's just sleeping. And then there was the big return. In 1945, as bananas trickled back into ports, the media prepared for the moment like it was the second coming. British newspapers printed banana recipes with actual bananas. Cooks wept. Children gawked. One report from Bristol described a toddler licking a banana and refusing to bite it, just so it wouldn't end. But the strange thing? Many families still made the fake recipes. Even when they had real bananas again. They'd spent 6 years learning how to cook without them, and now the substitute was tradition. Legacy. A flavor built from memory. And maybe, in the end, that's what wartime banana recipes were really about. Not taste. Not truth. But hope baked into a lie. Now you're strolling under fake palm trees and studio floodlights, the Los Angeles air warm and glitter-tinted. It's 1943, and you've just walked onto the soundstage of a B-grade wartime musical called Tropic Tango. Off to the side, a woman in a sequin fruit headdress, yes, actual bananas balanced atop her curls, sips coffee through a straw while crew members rehearse a slapstick routine involving a peel, a pratfall, and a pie to the face. Welcome to Hollywood and the banana gag, a golden age of soft power fruit where every slip meant something, and every giggle pushed the Allied cause a little further down the field. You've seen it before. The wide-eyed private on KP duty who throws a banana peel behind him and takes down a whole platoon. The vaudeville holdover who uses banana peels as improvised judo weapons. The femme fatale whose sultry strut is interrupted, boink, by a banana gag that turns seduction into slapstick. Wartime audiences laughed, and the message slipped in, unnoticed, keep spirits up. Laugh through the fear. Slip, but don't fall. Here's your historical fact. From 1942 to 1945, at least 33 major studio films and newsreels included banana peel gags, many of them explicitly written into war-related scripts. Some were in morale-boosting musicals. Others in GI comedies. All of them part of the great banana sweep that made humor a frontline weapon. You duck behind the camera now as the director of Yanks Ahoy shouts, "Cue the peel!" A prop hand throws it. A fake German spy trips. The audience will howl. The implication, Axis leaders? Buffoons. Fallible. Losable. And there's Carmen Miranda, the Brazilian bombshell. You peek into a makeup trailer where she's pinning real fruit to her hat, again. It's bananas, mostly, because they're funny, tropical, and slightly ridiculous. But beneath the rhinestones and samba rhythms was a strategic edge. Miranda, handpicked to be America's Latin liaison under the Good Neighbor policy, became a walking banana diplomacy machine. She didn't just entertain, she reassured Americans that Latin America was on their side. Quirky tidbit? The U.S. State Department reportedly advised her wardrobe include familiar tropical symbols. And what's more familiar than a banana? Carmen Miranda wasn't just a performer. She was a weaponized fruit basket. Even Disney got involved. In the wartime short Saludos Amigos, part of the U.S. government-backed effort to promote inter-American unity, tropical fruit danced across the screen. Bananas, pineapples, and papayas conjured past smiling cartoon faces. The idea? Latin America is full of friends. And fun. And fruit. Historians still argue whether Hollywood was consciously collaborating with government propaganda or simply cashing in on the tropical trend. Either way, film became fruit-shaped reassurance. For tired audiences, a banana wasn't just a joke. It was a reminder, things were still silly. Life still had curves. And comedy was still on the table. You step into a cramped theater in Chicago now. The screen flashes with Private Banana, a short comedy produced by the Army Pictorial Service. The plot? A nervous recruit keeps slipping on bananas until he, accidentally, stumbles into success. Message: trust the system. Laugh at your mistakes. You'll still win the war. Theaters even ran banana-themed intermission games, handing out tiny rubber peels for kids to throw at cardboard Hitler targets. Sometimes, propaganda didn't have to be subtle. It just had to be sticky. And let's not forget the USO shows. On a makeshift stage in the South Pacific, a comedian juggles bananas before launching into a routine about Nazi fruit allergies and the Luftwaffe's inability to aim after slipping on democracy. The laughter that follows is real. Exhausted. Grateful. In those moments, the banana is both a weapon and a bomb. Somewhere in the back of that crowd, a soldier writes home. Saw a guy fall on a banana peel and laughed so hard I forgot I was bleeding. Because sometimes, the joke was the medicine. Meanwhile, Hollywood itself churned out fruit-forward soundtracks. One novelty record, Banana Boogie for Victory, hit jukeboxes in 1944. With lyrics like, "Slip that Führer on a peel, we'll march and make him squeal." It didn't aim for subtlety. It aimed for a grin. Or maybe just a momentary escape. Even animated shorts got in on it. Bugs Bunny, in full marine regalia, once fed a banana to a Nazi goat. Popeye turned a banana into a grenade. Donald Duck got tangled in banana vines while sabotaging a munitions factory. The visual language was clear: bananas are funny. Nazis are not. Yet behind all this laughter was a serious undercurrent. Comedy in wartime is never just about release, it's about reframing fear. A banana peel lets you see the enemy fall before they really do. A fruit hat reminds you the world is still wide and wonderful and maybe, just maybe, on your side. And the legacy stuck. Post-war, many veterans remember not the speeches or leaflets, but the banana skits, the monkey mask dancers, the ridiculous slapstick that made war feel like something survivable. A retired Navy nurse once said, "The banana jokes made it feel like home was still out there. Waiting." So you step off that soundstage now, Carmen Miranda's laughter fading into the distance. You've seen the cameras, the cue cards, the writers nervously redrafting one more peel gag because it has to hit just right. And maybe it does. Because in the darkest of days, when bullets fly and spirits sag, sometimes all you need is someone to slip and remind you it's okay to laugh. You step now into the thick, humming heat of an imagined jungle, not the real one, mind you, but the kind you'd find painted on a Hollywood backdrop or sketched into the panels of an Allied propaganda comic. Towering banana trees sway in a wind that never existed. Parrots squawk over a phonograph playing calypso at half speed. Welcome to the banana jungle, half real, half fever dream, and fully weaponized by the wartime imagination. In Allied propaganda, jungles were less about flora and fauna, and more about tropes and textures. And nothing shouted, tropical, more clearly, or more lazily, than a cartoon banana tree. You could slap one onto a background, and voila, you were in the colonies, or enemy territory, or some remote Allied outpost where valor tastes like fruit. Here's your historical fact. Banana plants appeared in over 60 wartime posters and illustrations between 1940 and 1945 across American, British, and Australian campaigns, often inaccurately drawn, hilariously misplaced, and culturally tone-deaf. They were the palm tree's funnier cousin. Less majestic. More digestible. Literally. You move through an army recruitment poster from 1942. In it, a rugged soldier slashes his way through vines while a nervous, cartoonish monkey flings bananas at a shadowy Axis figure. The caption? Clear the jungle! Secure the victory! It's goofy, yes, but it's also coded, the banana jungle as a stand-in for exotic danger, primitive threat, and Allied conquest. Nature is wild, but it's ours now. It's all part of a visual shorthand. In wartime films and leaflets, banana trees told audiences, "This is far away. This is foreign. This is where your boys are fighting. Don't worry about the details." And boy, were the details flexible. You flip open an issue of Yank, the Army Weekly, and spot a jungle spread labeled Borneo Dispatch. There are banana trees, sure, but also lions, not native, toucans, wrong continent, and a bare-chested guide named Tycho, leading American troops through the vines. It's fiction wrapped in khaki, held together by banana leaves and bravado. And here's your quirky tidbit. One Australian supply manual warned troops headed for Papua New Guinea not to attempt climbing banana trees for a better lookout point. Why? Because banana trees are actually large herbs. Their trunks collapse under weight. Several soldiers had already taken embarrassing tumbles trying to reenact their comic book training guides. The jungle did not cooperate with the script. But propaganda didn't care. In leaflets and films, banana jungles became places of moral clarity. Wild? Yes. But not wicked. The Axis were wicked. The jungle was just uncivilized. In need of Allied order. Preferably carried out with good posture and a bayonet. You stumble into a newsreel now, playing at a London cinema in 1943. It's a narrated montage of Allied troops liberating a village in Southeast Asia. The commentary calls the setting banana country, a phrase tossed out with the same tone you might reserve for describing a playground. The images flash by waving children, laughing soldiers, and always bananas. In crates. In trees. On hats. Never mind that much of the footage was shot in India and passed off as Burma. Or that the villagers were actors. The point was the myth of the banana jungle. It wasn't just a place, it was a feeling. Of Allied reach. Of benevolent might. Of control over the untamed. Historians still argue whether this jungle imagery shaped colonial attitudes post-war, or simply reflected them. Did the banana tropes normalize the idea of intervention? Did they soften the grim truths of jungle combat and empire building? Maybe both. Maybe the laughter was always a little too loud. You duck into a military base library now. On the wall is a poster titled, "Know Your Jungle Allies." It shows a map with banana trees dotting every Allied-held tropical zone. The implication? The jungle provides. The jungle is friendly. The banana jungle is with us. Meanwhile, in children's media, banana jungles became playgrounds of wartime fantasy. Storybooks featured talking banana trees that gave advice to Allied animals. One popular British character, Corporal Koala, parachuted into enemy jungles and used banana vines as zip lines. Kids weren't learning geography. They were learning allegiance. And over in Japan? Well, they had their own jungle tales. Axis propaganda portrayed the jungle as infested with American corruption, where bananas were either poisoned or symbolic of capitalist gluttony. One Tokyo newspaper ran a cartoon of an American pig slipping on a banana peel labeled Philippines. It didn't quite land, but you could see the cultural exchange happening in fruit form. Then there were the souvenir shops. Allied soldiers returning home brought banana-themed knickknacks, carved banana leaves, painted banana crates, toy monkeys. A whole industry bloomed around banana jungle kitsch. It said, "I was there." Even if there was mostly constructed by studio hands and printed leaflets. Back in the real jungle, things were less romantic. Soldiers endured mosquitoes, leeches, monsoons, and fungal infections no banana tree could cure. They learned quickly that real banana plants were too soft to lean on, too fragile to hide behind, and too bruised to romanticize. The jungle was real, but the propaganda? That was banana-flavored theater. Still, they carried the image home. In memory. In story. In song. One vet would later say in an interview, "We didn't really know where we were half the time. But we knew there were bananas. And that meant we were supposed to be the good guys." You step away from the backdrop jungle now, the painted leaves curling at the corners, the stage lights dimming. The banana trees fade to gray. But their message lingers. Not all propaganda needs to shout. Some of it just sways gently in the artificial breeze, whispering, "This place belongs to us now." You're lying in a darkened bunk aboard a rust-speckled cargo ship cutting through the Caribbean night. Somewhere below deck, sailors are singing softly. The melody drifts up through the hull like warm wind, wrapping around you with words that are half prayer, half memory. Day-o, me say day-o. Daylight come and me want go home. You hum along, not because you know the words, but because the banana boat rhythm lives in your bones now. The banana boat song, or day-o, as it's known today, didn't just pop out of nowhere in post-war America with Harry Belafonte's buttery voice. Its roots twist back through the war, deep into the docks, plantations, and supply lines of the West Indies, where fruit wasn't just a crop, but a clock. A rhythm. A quiet rebellion hidden in harmony. Here's your historical fact. Jamaican and Trinidadian dockworkers sang banana loading songs for decades, using call-and-response chants to pace the grueling nighttime labor of lifting crates by moonlight. The earliest recorded variations of day-o existed in oral tradition well before World War II, and by the 1940s, these songs were part of daily wartime operations. You picture it now, port workers in Kingston or Port of Spain forming bucket brigades, lifting heavy crates stamped U.S. war cargo, singing to keep time and break tension. The lyrics shifted nightly. Sometimes they named foremen. Sometimes they cursed Allied shipping delays. Sometimes they just wished for the sun to rise so they could stop. You tap your foot. The chorus is hypnotic. But the Allies heard more than rhythm. They heard an opportunity. Military and trade officials realized that these songs were catchy, unthreatening, and, most importantly, marketable. Banana boats weren't just floating cargo. They became symbols of friendly Caribbean partnership. Propaganda leaflets featured happy black dockworkers singing while crates marked for Allied victory got loaded in the background. Of course, the irony was thick. Many of these workers were paid pennies, denied proper equipment, and threatened with dismissal, or worse, if they unionized. But the posters didn't show that. They showed grins. Bananas. Sunshine. Here's your quirky tidbit. During one 1943 British naval visit to Trinidad, a military band was instructed to learn a calypso-inspired version of the Banana Boat song to play during dockside ceremonies. Local workers reportedly rolled their eyes and kept singing their own, real versions anyway, slower, deeper, less shiny. Historians still argue whether the Allied use of the banana boat image and calypso rhythm was cultural appreciation, appropriation, or a blend of both. One thing's clear: by the end of the war, banana boats had entered the Allied myth-making machine. You wander into a 1944 issue of Life magazine, where a photo spread shows Jamaican laborers aboard a United Fruit vessel, lifting crates in the glow of floodlights. The caption reads, "Singing the war effort home." The song? Not printed. Too foreign. Too slippery. The image says it all. At the same time, U.S. radio began airing exoticized versions of the banana boat rhythm in wartime jazz and swing. The tropical beat was sanitized, sped up, sweetened for domestic ears. Bananas weren't just a fruit anymore. They were a sound. And that sound, ironically, was loaded with contradiction. You're standing now on a dock at 4 a.m., watching a young man, a wartime stevedore, set down his crate and stretch. His back cracks. His voice cuts through the early mist. "Come, Mr. Tally Man, tally me banana." He's not thinking about Harry Belafonte. He doesn't even know that name yet. But the rhythm moves through him like inheritance. Elsewhere, a British officer jots a note in a field diary. Native workers use rhythmic calls when loading. Curious but efficient. A line so dry, it might turn to dust. In reality, those calls were also a kind of resistance. A way to preserve identity under uniforms, quotas, and imperial banners. Workers sometimes changed the lyrics in subtle ways, replacing banana with bullets or boss man. You had to listen carefully. Most people didn't. You now enter a post office in the Bronx, 1945. A soldier's mother has sent him a vinyl labeled Caribbean Loading Chance. The cover shows a man in silhouette, banana on his shoulder. Inside? A field recording of dockside chants captured by a British anthropologist who thought he was collecting quaintness, but accidentally preserved revolution. After the war, these sounds migrated. Veterans who'd passed through the Caribbean brought home memories of music and fruit, forever linked. One wrote in a letter, "I can't hear that banana song without tasting diesel and salt and rum." For some, it was nostalgia. For others, a trigger. And then came Harry Belafonte. He wasn't in the war. But the moment he released his version of Deo in the 1950s, it hit like a delayed explosion. To American ears, it was charming, exotic, fun. But to those who remembered the docks, the boats, the real banana beat, it was loaded. The post-war myth had landed. The banana boat song now meant something else entirely. It was pop. It was performance. It was a sanitized echo of the labor that helped win a war. And that's the core of this section. The banana wasn't just a fruit. It was a rhythm. A labor. A longing. Sung beneath the moonlight. While the world burned. Waiting for morning to come. You walk now through a crowded 1946 exhibition hall in London's South Bank. The war is over. Children laugh beside banana-shaped balloons. A proud sign overhead reads, "Victory Harvest, the world we won." Inside, a glittering display of tropical fruit stands at the heart of it all: mangoes, coconuts, pineapples, and of course, bananas. Lots of bananas. Neatly arranged in shining rows, yellow and inviting, as if they'd been here all along. But they hadn't. Not really. The banana's return was choreographed. It was a performance of normalcy, and for Britain especially, it needed to look triumphant. These weren't just fruits. They were symbols of imperial resilience, of a global system still intact. You watch as a government minister slices a banana ceremonially and offers it to a small, wide-eyed child. Cameras click. Headlines roll. "Bananas back on British soil. The war is over. The fruit is home." Here's your historical fact. In 1946, Britain orchestrated a nationwide banana reintroduction campaign, beginning with a shipment that docked in London after 6 long, banana-less years. The fruit was distributed first to children, under the premise that adults could wait. But make no mistake, this was a media event, a soft power spectacle, wrapped in fruit skins. And it wasn't just Britain. Across Europe and America, bananas became post-war metaphors. In children's books, they represented safety. In ad campaigns, they meant abundance. In wartime documentaries re-edited for victory reels, bananas were inserted into footage they'd never been part of, shoved into crates, stacked at train depots, lifted joyously by grateful hands. But not all of it was honest. You step into a 1947 propaganda film titled Tropic Triumph, which claims Allied soldiers were kept well-fed with tropical fruits during key battles. There's a slow-motion shot of a GI biting into a banana under enemy fire. Looks inspiring. Never happened. That footage? Shot in Florida. The soldier? A reenactor. The message? Still effective. Historians still argue whether post-war banana imagery was harmless nostalgia or strategic myth-making. On the one hand, it gave people something sweet to believe in. On the other, it scrubbed away the messy truths, colonial exploitation, rationed hunger, and the sly conversion of fruit into ideology. You visit a classroom in Manchester now, where students receive bananas from a school program sponsored by the Empire Fruit Board. The teacher says, "This is what peace tastes like." The kids cheer. But in the back row, a girl eyes the fruit suspiciously. She was born during the war. She's never seen a banana before. She peels it slowly, unsure. Then takes a bite. Later, she'll say it tasted like chalk and glue. But she smiled anyway. Here's a quirky tidbit. In 1946, several schools held banana reintroduction parties, complete with paper crowns and banana-shaped cakes. In one Welsh school, a fake banana queen was crowned. Her scepter? A particularly ripe plantain tied with a ribbon. Meanwhile, the United Fruit Company went into marketing overdrive. Their ads boasted that bananas won the war, showcasing their fleets and logistics contributions with a healthy dose of revisionist glamour. Bananas weren't just back, they were heroic, victorious, strangely muscular. One campaign showed a banana flexing its peel like a bicep beside the words, "Power from the tropics. Fuel for freedom." Another ad promised that every banana you buy builds tomorrow. The fruit had moved from poster prop to post-war icon. And yet, the dissonance lingered. In colonized regions, the end of the war did not bring sweetness. In Jamaica, in Honduras, in Trinidad, workers returned to the same backbreaking conditions they'd known before. The bananas they grew and packed were being used to celebrate victories they'd barely benefited from. One anonymous graffiti message appeared on a warehouse wall in Belize in 1946. "We fight, we sweat, you eat." The post-war banana myth-making had two audiences. For the West, it was a nostalgic reboot. For the colonized, it was an insult layered in yellow skin. But few questioned it. In post-war America, bananas resumed their position at the breakfast table like they'd never left. In Europe, they appeared in ration shops like exotic peace tokens. And in textbooks, they were rewritten into war narratives with astonishing casualness. One 1948 British history reader includes a chapter called "Bananas Return with Peace," which describes Winston Churchill inspecting a fruit shipment as a symbol of empire unity and restoration. There's no mention of strikes, sabotage, or spy crates. Just smiles and starch. And then, of course, came the films. The banana jokes persisted, but now with post-war polish. Characters no longer slipped in panic. They slipped in comfort. The war was over. You could laugh again. But that laughter came at a cost. The propaganda had worked too well. The banana, once a symbol of longing and sacrifice, had been rewritten as a symbol of triumph. The difficult years, the make-do recipes, the hollowed peels filled with microfilm, the parsnip custards, were painted over with nostalgia. It wasn't just the fruit that returned. It was the illusion of stability. The suggestion that the world had snapped back into shape, and the banana was proof. You close a magazine from 1947, its cover showing a boy holding a banana like a trophy. The caption reads, "Back in his hands, where it belongs." But the truth? The banana never belonged to him. It belonged to a world of empire, of labor, of quiet struggle. And now, that world was rewriting its story. One peel at a time. You're standing now in the middle of a quiet war museum tucked into a foggy corner of Dorset. The exhibits are dimly lit, the air smells faintly of polished wood and distant school groups, and in a glass case near the back, just past ration books and parachute silk, you spot something odd, a banana peel, yellowed with age, sealed beneath a tiny plaque that reads, "World War II Propaganda Artifact, recovered from RAF Station, 1944. And just like that, you feel the story closing in. This isn't just a museum. It's a tomb of meanings. And this banana peel, once slapped down for a laugh, or a coded message, or simply a soldier's snack, is a relic of something much bigger. You've traced its arc through empire and recipe books, across spy crates and calypso rhythms. And now, in the sterile hush of curated history, the banana asks one last question. What did it all mean? Let's peel back the layers one more time. The banana, cheap and cheerful, became a symbol of stability before the storm. Before Hitler, before rationing, before blackout curtains, it sat quietly on Western tables, eaten without fuss. It was globalism before we had a word for it, fruit traveling continents overnight, made possible by labor far away, shipped by invisible hands. And then came war. Here's your final historical fact. By 1945, bananas had appeared in over 1,000 pieces of Allied media, from posters and cartoons to nutritional reports and resistance communiques. And not by accident. Governments knew their power. Bananas became a stand-in for normalcy, energy, connection, and empire. A strange cocktail of comfort and control. You stroll now through the war's echoes, past murals of cartoon monkeys saluting, past the hand-drawn leaflets dropped over France, past filmed clips of Carmen Miranda shaking her hat like an Allied flag. These weren't just distractions. They were narratives, tools of persuasion, coated in yellow curves and familiar sweetness. Quirky closing tidbit? One British intelligence officer, reflecting years later, admitted in his memoirs that he still couldn't eat a banana without feeling like someone was watching. He never explained what he meant. He didn't have to. Historians still argue, of course. Some say the banana was accidental mythology, a symbol that evolved by chance. Others argue it was crafted deliberately, a fruit molded into meaning by governments desperate for morale. The truth, like most propaganda, is probably both. Because in war, everything becomes a message. Even breakfast. And what a message it was. Bananas told occupied people that the Allies still had reach. They told children in bombed cities that something soft and sweet still existed. They told imperial powers that the tropics were still tethered to their tables. They told housewives how to improvise hope with parsnips and sugar. They told cartoonists how to make fascists fall on their backsides. And they told governments, quietly, that sometimes a laugh was stronger than a bullet. You stand at the exit of the museum now, the door creaking open to a gray drizzle. The world outside has changed. Empires have collapsed. Recipes have improved. Jokes have shifted. But the banana? It's still here. Still funny. Still global. Still slippery. And maybe that's the point. Because in all its wartime roles, as weapon, metaphor, mascot, stand-in, siren song, what the banana really did was this. It let us believe. Believe that the world could be silly again. That the hard things could be sweetened. That the ordinary could survive the extraordinary. Even if only as a joke. Even if only in memory. You're still there, I know, eyes half closed, the soft hum of your fan whispering over your blankets. Maybe the room's a little cooler now. Maybe you've forgotten how we even got here. That's okay. Tonight we followed a fruit, something ordinary, familiar, and peeled back 1,000 unexpected truths. We wandered through jungles both real and invented, tiptoed across leaflets falling like yellow snow, and drifted with sailors and spies who tucked their secrets into waxy skins and crates stamped tropical. And now, it's all behind you. Quiet. Still. Let the buzz of wartime ports fade. Let the posters curl in your mind, their colors melting back into sleep. Let the songs, those rhythms of banana boats and midnight voices, settle into silence. You don't need to remember the dates, the headlines, the debates. Just the feeling that even in the hardest times, even when the world was cracking under itself, something as small and strange as a banana could carry hope. Or laughter. Or just a reminder that not everything has to make sense to mean something. Let that last peel slide away. No more falling. Just resting. You're safe now. The lights are low. The war is long over. And the fruit's back on the shelf. Sweet dreams.